a lot of times people get into what I call a victim mentality. And by the way, there's four, we'll call them identities that most people operate in. You can operate as a victim, a villain, a hero, or a guide. When you look at the best stories out there, people play almost every single one of those roles. I'll give you an example of this. When you watch a movie like Lord of the Rings, okay, you've got a victim. That could be Gollum, okay? He has really been tortured and tormented by this ring and by other evil forces. He's been an outcast, and so he's really a victim that you'll see there in the Lord of the Rings. The villain, of course, is Lord Sauron and those dark forces. A hero, we see that could be Aragorn, it could be Frodo, and then, of course, a guide, that's Gandalf, right? It's the mentor of the story. It's the Yoda. It's the Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's that mentor that's helping the hero succeed and win. And I want you to think about yourself right now. Which one of those identities do you play? Do you play a victim more, a villain, a hero, or a guide? And I'll probably surprise you with sharing you what the villain actually looks like here in a minute. But a victim, here's the reality, a victim is helpless and powerless. Some of the characteristics of a victim is they're very self-focused. They're trying to just help themselves out of this crisis and situation. They're helpless. They're full of excuses. And they're really typically in a point to where they don't change. And here's what happens. Either they actually can't change because they're truly a victim, right? Like, so there are true victims out there. So if somebody has been kidnapped in sex trafficking is a real thing today. That's a true victim. But somebody that's in a situation where they can change, but they're choosing not to, that's oftentimes because they've really embraced what we call a victim mentality. And it's something psychologists call learned helplessness. It's a theory by actually Martin Siegelman. He's a psychologist that coined the term in the 1960s. And basically it's this: it enforces the negative belief that if we can't do anything about our situation, we might as well give up. And so living as a victim, here's the thing you need to know though as well. If you live as a victim, it will strain every relationship you have, because every single person around you is forced to cater to your emotional needs, your condition, your disease, your pain, your loss, your heartache, your void. Now, I do want to say we need to be empathetic to the needs of others. And if you are experiencing pain and suffering, and let's say it goes on a few days or even a few months, that's understandable, or it's periods of time. But to live in a victim mentality year after year after year, day after day after day, you're actually harming yourself, you're making yourself worse, and you're making everyone around you miserable and making their lives worse in most cases. And again, you're not serving yourself. So if you're a person, and by the way, we all know these people, right? So you might not be that person, but we all know those people. They're always talking about their condition, their disease, how bad life is, and it's woe is me, living in this state constantly. Now, again, I want to be empathetic here. Let's say, for instance, I'll give you an example. When my mom was just diagnosed with cancer, that was hard. And for her, she had to bear being that victim for a period of time. But long term, it did not help her to stay in that victim mentality. By the way, my mom was one of these people. She had a victim mentality for many years. And she was eventually able to completely break free of it, or for the most part, break free of it. And her life got tremendously better. Right? When I was diagnosed with a condition where I might not walk, and I didn't walk for a year, when I was in that situation, I could have lived in that state. But even after just a few days, I said, I will not live in this state. Now, that doesn't mean that I didn't have times with Chelsea where I said, hey, can I just, and I would pre-frame it. I'd say, listen, I'm having a hard few hours here, a hard day. Can I just vent to you for a minute? She said, yeah. I'd vent for a minute. I said, okay, I feel better. Okay, you know what? Let's talk about the positive things. Let's talk about how great our life can be and what's going on good right now. And so listen, if you have something on your heart and you are suffering in some way and you're experiencing pain or disease or heartache or a void in your life, let it out. You should. But it shouldn't be a 24-hour thing, days and days and weeks, and a constant thing, or it takes up the majority of your mind frame in life, because it will make your life worse. Now, the first person I typically go to this is God. God hears you. He's experienced your pain. and he knows what you're going through. And so that's a person who can handle that sort of negativity in the moment. And then those people close to you. But then as soon as you can, again, you need to really go and say, you know what? I'm going to have a resilient, positive mindset and knowing that I can take this on. When I was told I might not walk, I decided, you know what? I am going to walk. I don't care what the doctor said. I'm going to walk. I'm going to beat this thing with when my mom had cancer, it was the same thing. She decided, even though the doctor gave her a 40% chance to live. So in all likelihood, the doctor said, you're going to die. She believed that she was going to live. And now 25 some years later, my mom is, in her 70s in great health. And maybe you've experienced that yourself, where you've gone through a struggle, you've been able to break free. But it's important to understand, if you or the other people around you are living in a victim mindset, it's not benefiting you or them at all. And I experience this a lot with patients. Sometimes I would have a patient come in, let's say, and I'm thinking about one patient in particular, and she came in to see me and she had chronic fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue. And I also want to say, this was 15 years ago. At one point, she was diagnosed with Lyme disease, and she just felt terrible. Her joints ached. She was tired all the time, and she had came in, but every time it was negativity, negativity, negativity. And the other thing I started realizing is that her disease became her identity. She believed that the biggest part, the most important part of her identity to her was her condition, her fibromyalgia, her chronic fatigue, her being a Lyme victim. And I had to sit down with her and I said, listen, I want to let you know that I feel for you. This is incredibly hard. You feel bad. Your joints hurt. But you're actually hurting yourself and your own body if you continue to believe this. And and I told her this. I said, I don't want you to say you have fibromyalgia again. I want you to say, hey, you don't feel the best today, but you're getting better. You're getting better. You're healing. A year from now, you're going to feel radically different. And so she started saying, I'm healing. I'm feeling better. I'm moving in the right direction. Because you don't want to lie about it either, but you do want to believe and know she was under care. She was doing great things. She was changing her diet. She was moving in the right direction. And when she was able to do that, by the way, a year later, she didn't feel 100% better, but she felt about 80% better. I mean, she experienced a massive breakthrough. It was about 3 months after care. It was like, something happened and she just started feeling much, much better. And so just know, you want to have that mindset, but many people live with this victim mindset a big part of their life. And here's the big thing about victims is, the victim mentality is, they don't believe they can change. It's actually tied to a limiting belief. They believe that I'm stuck like this, or they get a dopamine hit, like this positive dopamine hit, because people feel bad for them, and they're getting attention that way. So some people are doing it because they actually want attention. Now, most people wouldn't admit that, but that's the reality, and that's actually what the psychology shows us, is that they find that as a way to help ease some of their pain when they get attention, when people feel bad for them. But it's not helping anyone. So don't play the victim. Number 2, don't play the villain. A villain is akin to the evil dictator who aspires to control no matter how many might be destroyed in their path, right? Now, we know the quintessential dictator that we've talked about the past 100 years, and Adolf Hitler. Of course, he was a dictator. Joseph Stalin, Mao. I mean, there are a lot of evil dictators. We see these in the movies, right? I mentioned Sauron. We've seen in the Harry Potter series, Voldemort. We see, President Snow in the Hunger Games. I'm just going through some stories that some of us are likely familiar with. So we know who the villain is, and most of us never think of ourselves as the villain. But if you embody any one of these characteristics, you are playing the villain. Being resentful. Resentfulness is looking at somebody and just thinking, it's a disdain for the person. It's you're not good enough. You have a superiority complex, or you sort of it's more of a subtle I hate you. And this happens a lot in relationships. By the way, I was watching a lecture by a psychologist recently, and he said, I can tell if somebody's going to get a divorce and if they're going to have a bad relationship very early on in a marriage. And he said it's based on this. If a spouse ever rolls their eyes at another spouse, or if they look at each other kind of like with a side eye, like, what are they talking about? Those both embody a level of resentfulness. And so if you do that as a spouse or to friends or family, know that you're being a villain. You're being evil in that way. And so you want to do everything you can to nix resentfulness. Narcissism, of course. Everything's about you. You're always trying to one up people. Not changing. If you are in a place in life where you're just not changing, you've kind of been the same 10 years ago as today, you're not growing, that's a characteristic of a victim, but also of a villain. That's really victims and villains, they don't change. Now, victims basically stay frozen in the corner without changing. Villains take their pain and inflict it upon others. We've heard the saying, hurt people hurt people. That's what villains do. They're hurting other people. I want to give you an example, just sharing kind of something that I did personally where I was being a villain. I was on this happened, I embarrassingly want to say about a month or two ago. I was on the phone with somebody from an airline, and they passed me to the third person after I waited on hold for an hour, and they just kept passing me off. And finally, I got really frustrated and kind of went on this rant about how bad the customer service was, everything else. And I realized afterwards, this is not this woman's fault. This is my fault. And by the end of it, I said, you know what? I'm taking my frustration out on you. I'm sorry. But I realized in that moment, I'm being a villain right now. I'm being unnecessarily mean to somebody. It's not her fault necessarily. And so, but all that being said, a lot of us, all of us play one of these four roles at every point in the day. If you're a parent, you're playing the guide almost at every point in the day. So all that being said, most of us are playing these roles all day. But villains, here's the other thing that's so interesting. Villains and heroes both start off as victims. Think about Harry Potter and Voldemort, okay? They're both orphans. Voldemort is an orphan and uses his pain to inflict pain on others. Harry Potter is an orphan, and he takes his pain and uses it for purpose to do great things in the world and to help others, right? And so it's all based on this. Villains basically live in their pain. Heroes go and use their pain for good in order to heal and help others. And so if you ever go through anything trying in life and you're in a victim, let's say you've got a medical condition like Lyme disease or hypothyroidism, and you're tired all the time, or you were abused, even in any way in your life, and you're still living with that today. Your life will become the best life possible if you use that pain and use that pain to help others. That's the reality. That will help you live your best life story. But it takes getting uncomfortable. Sometimes it takes going back and facing that pain, and then going and working hard to overcome that pain by transforming yourself. Now, number 3 is the hero. The hero is the person who summons the courage to make the change in their life, the one who storms the castle or topples the evil regime. The characteristics of the hero are, number 1, they are willing to transform and they believe they can transform. So they're willing. They're willing to go on the adventure. Think about Bilbo Baggins, right? He's a little hobbit, but he's like, I am going to go and confront the dragon smog. I'm going to leave my comfy hobbit hole, and I'm going to go out there on an adventure. Most of us are not living an adventure. If I were to ask you, is your life adventurous? Is it exciting? Now listen, sometimes we're at phases in life. Chelsea and I just went through one of these where we have a 3-month-old baby right now, okay? Would I say that the past 3 months have been like exhilarating and crazy? Well, I'd say our home birth was awesome and almost like this supernatural experience. And so actually that was pretty awesome. But, maybe in the past couple months of staying at home and ordering food in more and that sort of thing, maybe it's not quite as, but we have some other adventures scheduled for this summer, like a trip to Europe and, serving our community, some things we're doing at church. And so we do have some exciting things we're up to. Okay. A new business we're launching, things we're writing. So, we definitely have some stuff coming, but my point is not every single minute of every day or every month or even every year has to be the big adventure, but we should have some things we're really excited about and some big things we're up to. One of the biggest things you could be up to is raising great kids, which I'll get into next. But here are the characteristics again of a hero: willing to transform, accepting responsibility. This is huge. Heroes say, you know what? I'm a little hobbit. I'm this little person with billions of people on the planet. Yeah, I'm going to take responsibility for, feeding the hungry in this area, or starting up this new company that's going to help save and transform lives, or raising these great kids, right? But accepting full responsibility. If you're a person and you're always passing responsibility on to other people and you never want to take blame, You should take as much blame as possible. You should take responsibility, take ownership in in an extreme way. I want to give you an example of this. When I first opened up my functional medicine clinic in Nashville, Tennessee, I had the mentality that anyone who got sick or died of a chronic condition in the whole city of Nashville or Franklin or Brentwood, just the whole area, or Hendersonville, that was my responsibility. When I saw somebody who had an overdose of aspirin or something like that, I thought to myself, gosh, you know what, that's partly my responsibility. And it wasn't in an unbearable way to the world. It was, I'm taking full responsibility for the city, and I'm going to get on a radio show, which I was able to get on a 3-hour radio show and speak to, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people on a regular basis, a podcast, a YouTube show. My mentality was, I'm going to help save lives of people like my mom who could have avoided cancer if they knew how to use food as medicine and lifestyle medicine and mindset medicine. And I took responsibility. And so really, there's a saying in Spider-Man that we all love: with great power comes great responsibility. And that's true. But I also think the more that you embrace responsibility in a healthy way, the more power it gives you. You cannot, if you don't take responsibility for anything, you have no power to influence anything in a way. Versus if you take on a great responsibility, you have a greater ability to impact the lives of others. And so if you want to make the biggest change you can in the world and live your best life possible, you have to live the life of a hero. Here's another big thing about the hero is they grow in character and virtue. They become, along the story, we see this with whether it's Harry Potter or Bilbo Baggins or Frodo or Luke Skywalker. We see these people who they tend to be small and timid and bullied in their life and lacking courage. And through this big goal, that they're trying to accomplish, they become more loving, more courageous. They have more wisdom. They grow in their character and virtue along the way. And that's what I mean, putting yourself in a tough story. If you have a big goal and you say, I'm going to grow in character through this in order to achieve it, you will grow in that way. Again, heroes use their pain for good. And here's another big thing about heroes. They have great desires. They want more out of life. That's one of the starts. If you're kind of sitting around and you're thinking, you know what, I'm happy just to scroll the internet and watch TV and just live a ho-hum life, then maybe you're not cut out to be the hero. But if you're saying to yourself, you know what, I do want more out of life. I want to get to the end of my life and know I ran the best race possible, that I made a difference. I raised the best kids. I was a great spouse, that my life mattered and was incredibly meaningful and I was significant. That's the first part of being a hero, is you have a desire to do something and contribute to the world with your life. That's really where it starts. And the hero knows that, well, here's the other thing. The hero knows that while they can't control everything, they can control certain aspects of their life. And they want to have a good impact on the world. And here's the other thing. Even if the odds are stacked against you, you have to take ownership. And this is the case always. It's mission impossible, yet they accomplish the mission, right? And so you want to think about that as much as possible. Here's the other thing. The hero, the villain, is always thinking about themselves and how to get things to serve themselves. The hero's mindset is totally removed from themselves, and their focus almost fully on serving and saving others. The villain is depressed. The hero is full of joy and hope because they've shifted from self-focused to others-focused. That's another key quality of a hero. Now, here's the good news I want to share with you. If you're living in a state of a victim where this has been you, you're full of excuses, you complain a lot, you're always talking about your condition, or you're a villain to where that you've been resentful, you've harbored unforgiveness, you've hurt others, or you do that regularly in order to make yourself feel good. Here's the good news. Both characters are redeemable. Think about Anakin Skywalker, who became Darth Vader. At the end, he's redeemed, right? And many people are redeemed much, much earlier in their stories. You have the power to change. With the right mind shift, you can become the hero or the guide who leads the hero, facing the trials and doing big things with your life. Hey, if you liked this, then watch my full episode right here.